Hi, Vincent.
Hello.
Hello. How are
How
you?
are you? I'm
I'm,
good.
I'm
Well, I think
okay. I've been busy. And you?
I'm good. I'm good. Um, I'm waiting to hear back from this job. I really want this job at this lab.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get this job at this lab, I'm gonna go back to school. So, my whole thing about the artificial wombs, I would like this because the job is at a fertility lab that does all different kinds of fertility stuff. I would specifically be working in andrology, which is sperm, so not directly related to the artificial womb stuff, but I mean, they have other departments there that work on the other side, which is women, right? And they do in
Mm-hmm.
vitro fertilization and genetic testing and all different kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And I found a degree, as I was saying, I found a degree in natural science that I can finish online, but I can take a lot of biology with it. So, at this point in my life, I have to really be, um, I have to be practical and realistic about what I can accomplish. I mean, I can't go back to school. I can't go back to school and take all those labs like biochemistry and organic chemistry too, and instrumental and stuff like that. I just don't have the time. I have to work, and it's very strenuous and stuff like that. So if I do this online thing, I don't have to take as many complicated classes, or I don't have to take labs. I can take complicated classes, but I don't have to take labs, or the only lab I would have to take is genetics, I think, and I would wait until later in time to do that. But I could take genetics, I could take developmental biology, which is what is, I need to know about that, developmental biology. Um,
What is that?
like how you get from genes to a full animal or a full human being.
What, from sort of fetus to what?
What?
Being born and becoming adult. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like development. Yeah, from fetus to human being to yeah,
Mm-hmm.
development into a human being from a fetus from an egg.
So that means it's embryology, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of like yeah, embryology. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
You said we might get interrupted. What's happening?
Well, it seems to have gone quiet, so perhaps he won't. Um, hopefully, um, we won't get interrupted. Um,
Okay. Um, yeah, so I'm, really excited about this and I really want this to happen because this would be a really good thing to happen in my life. I think it would change my life around right now if I got so it's a better job. It's $3 more an hour than what I was making. So it's a good pay leap. And it's a good pay leap. Good environment leap. Oh, did I tell you I did tell you, right, that they invited me to go back to my old job because so I was working in retail and I left because they were mistreating me there. And then
mhm.
about a month later, all the managers there that I was having problems with, they just quit. There was a problem with their manager and there was an argument and they all just quit. So they called me up and they were asking me for,
You could be the manager.
well, I know they called me up and were asking me for all the passcodes and everything, which I
Yes, you
remembered
told
all the,
us.
yeah, I gave them all the passcodes and then like, if you want to come back, you can. And I was thinking about it and I was like, well, if I don't get this job, I might I might go
Well, had you
back.
hurried them up? I mean, did they say they let you know by a certain time?
They
Because
said
you
they were.
might.
Well, the thing is that I've already decided that no matter whether they get back to me or not, I'm not going back to my old job. It's a shithole. It's a bad company to work for. And, I have unemployment and I'm making more on unemployment than I am if I went back to work in retail. So, I'm just
Okay.
gonna wait. I'm gonna wait for a better job to come along.
Yeah, I just thought it might look good on your CV, you know. You know, like I was sacked, or I resigned, and then they asked for me back, and just kind of showing your power, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really know what to do for the best. But in terms of political activism, have you made any progress on that?
Well, I've slowed down in a lot of things. I have a lot of back work to do with my Noahide, so I have a lot of articles I have to write about, and I have to finish my book review. I have to finish that book, The Rainbow Covenant by Michael Dallin, and I'm probably a little bit more than halfway through with it, and I've been doing it for like a year. As you can see, I'm not hyper motivated, and I also have to get through Alan Cecil's book.
How many
Uh,
pages is Talon's book?
Maybe 300 or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to. Well, I guess you might just have to take a day off, and do it and switch off your phone or something. Maybe that's the only way to do it these
Well,
days because
I
of the
can't do
distractions.
I
I
can't
know
do
it's
it.
hard.
I can't do it until I go back to work and I'm outside the house and I have things I'm doing outside the house because right now I have nothing else to do
Yeah.
besides political activist work, and I don't want to touch it because I've just overindulged in it and I'm tired of it, and I'm not going to be able to do it unless I do something that is either recreational or distracting. Like I need to, I'm not really doing anything right now, so not like really entertaining myself and getting any kind of what's it called, enjoyment. So, I really, without any enjoyment, I really can't put up with too much, having to do too much work, even though I believe in it, it's still work, like writing the articles, researching,
Hmm.
finding the quotes and all this other kind of stuff. I believe in it, but it is tiring.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose. I mean, for me, it's well, just talking about it is kind of work in a way because you do have to hang around and you have to pay attention and you have to bide your time and that sort of thing. And yes, it does eat up, on the hours of your.
Hello? I can't hear you, Claire. You blacked out. You've been blacked out for about 30 seconds, and I don't see your icon lighting up, so maybe your mic is off.
Day. But
Oh, did you hear
did
me, Claire? Claire?
hello?
Did you hear me?
I heard you saying you couldn't hear me, and then I started talking again, and then there was silence, and then I started talking about the G block streams,
Okay, go on about G Block, yes.
and I was wondering if you heard the latest one and what
Y
you thought of them.
No, I have not heard the latest one, but you told me that there was an argument or a debate between you and who?
Well, somebody called St James, I think. Yes, at St James, but Ralph was there and a few others. I mean, a few people that you've already spoken to on two
Mhm.
previous occasions, probably. And what I notice is that um, the argument is quite easily won. I don't know if you remember me using these arguments, that um, that. We are here because there was a creation. Because there was a creation, there must have been a creator, and that creator was God. And if you're a scientist, all the more can't you answer the question, because the, one of the more obvious ways of denying God would be to deny that there was a creation, and to say, as Jen Shaft did, who is Church of Entropy, that uh, there wasn't a creation and the universe was always there. But if you're a scientist, you don't want to find yourself denying the Big Bang, which was an act of creation, was it not?
Well, I don't know, but I don't say it was God. I think that's just a big stretch, and you really shouldn't make that stretch. I just should say that we really, we don't know exactly how it got here. We're trying to figure it out through science, but maybe we'll never figure it out, and just deal with that. And instead of making up God, there's no reason to make up God.
Well, I mean, people can say, oh, well, people have been talking about God for, thousands of years. Oh, there's the Jews, there's the Torah, there's the Quran. This is the evidence, and and wasn't the Big Bang an act of creation?
We don't
And
even know if
has
the Big Bang
been
is
described
real.
as so by scientists.
It's a theory. I mean, even the Big Bang, there, we don't even know if that's totally what happened. I mean, we really don't know, but that's where it needs to end when you say, I don't know. You can't, it's not fair to just say, well, there must be someone called God, and this is what God wants, and he's male, and these are his laws. And there's no need for all of that. There's no evidence for that. There's no need to get into that. Just say, I don't know. It's more humble to say, I don't know, than to say, I know it's God, and and I know what God wants.
I understand, because uh, it's a supposition, or a presupposition, and but the narrative is powerful because it's so simple, and I suppose that's why um, people hang on to it, because people can remember the theory. But if you started talking about evolution, people would get bored. But if you said, well, who else did then? Basically the theist has won the argument, because the atheist won't be able to say, what created the universe. I mean, they can say, well, maybe the universe wasn't created, and but then he'll be up against all these scientists whose sacred theory is the Big Bang.
Hmm.
And I think, therein lies the victory. I mean, okay, people can say, well, we don't really know, we're just speculating, but it is it is in the competition of narratives, the narrative that is understood and simple wins over the one that says, I don't know.
Well, that's because most people are not very humble.
Hmm.
That's because most people are not humble enough to say, I don't know. I mean, these people are very arrogant. They want to be able to say, oh, yes, I know where everything came from, and I'm so certain about it. And not only do I know who created it, but I know what they want
And
and
he's
who they
my
are.
friend.
Yes,
He's
and
my
he's my
friend.
friend, and he looks over me, and he sends spirits to take care of me, and
Mm.
all these different kinds of things. And he has a holy book, and he wrote it. It wasn't a man who actually wrote it, it was him. And just like all this nonsense.
Well, you, even as an atheist, or are you agnostic? I'm not even sure
I'm
what you are.
agnostic. I'm agnostic.
Okay, and so am I. So we're okay. So people who want to believe in God would say, well, you can't disprove the existence of God, because the theory of God still works. So even to say, oh, but God's so evil and he's done all these terrible things, and but there is an explanation for that too. The problem of theodicy. Have you heard that? You have heard of that expression, haven't you?
Of the what?
Theodicy, the problem of evil.
Theodicy, yeah.
Yes, and um, and basically it's saying, people use that argument, say, well, why would God allow evil? And because there is evil, and God can't exist. But that doesn't disprove God, because according to the whole belief system of the Abrahamic God, it is that God will will reward good and punish evil in this life or the next. So even as we complain about the terrible things that is allowed to happen, the bargain is, still stands. It's like, well, you're not dead yet. You don't know. You don't know if God really doesn't exist and will never punish evil or reward good.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I don't really go and I think that's childish to say that because they're evil, there's evil that means God doesn't exist, because who says that God needs to be good? Who says that God, that God doesn't have some evil in him? I mean, who made that up? Who came up with that rule? It's just an arbitrary rule that would be wholly good, and so therefore, how does it make sense that he would do anything evil? I mean, God doesn't need to be wholly good. I mean, God could be a mix of good and evil. Just, he could be like any person who's a mix of good and evil.
Well, the view on Judaism, that it is that he is good. You see, because the whole system of belief is that they have to know, or believe to the extent of thinking that they know God exists, and they also have to believe that he acts for good reasons, for moral reasons, and that is part of their system of belief. So they're not allowed to say, oh, God is evil. To, they're certainly not allowed to think that. And I mean, the reasons of it are clear, because obviously you don't want to love, you know, somebody who's, who might be evil, or because, well, I mean, you wouldn't want to, and you wouldn't put your faith in somebody that to be occasionally evil. I mean, so I guess most Jewish, okay, those who are Jewish and want to continue believing in Judaism would have to construct a narrative to explain the existence of evil, and say, well, okay, and then one of the reasons is, well, these things are sent to try us, because all the bad stuff that's happened, it's meant to test us, to see how we respond to it, and whether we lose faith or whether we continue. And then there's this, the story of Job, and all that kind of thing, to encourage us to think that um, salvation lies in belief and faith. And even if we don't believe in God, the I mean, you can kind of prove that it would be better if we obeyed his laws, because then we would have less crime, our taxes would be lower, things would make more sense in a way. But yes, we would have to give up the idea of sexual liberation from the rules of marriage and good parenting. That would be the sacrifice required of us.
No, Claire, I'm inventing the fucking artificial wombs, and we just don't, and people will just, make it so that there's more permanent, non-evasive birth control. Like we have to invent birth control for men because then all men will be on birth control because no man wants to have kids. Stop. If it's up to, the only problem, the reason we have so many problems is because birth control is in the hands of women. Like for the most part, unless you're talking about condoms, for the most part, it's the woman who needs to be on birth control in order to prevent
Yeah, but
having
I've heard of the
children.
male pill. The thing is,
It
if
hasn't
you're a
come out
woman,
yet.
I've heard of it. I'm sure.
No, there
Hasn't
is
it
no
come
male
out?
birth control. No, there's no male birth control.
Is
Hold
there?
on.
I heard about it some time ago, but the thing is, it doesn't work in the sense that women would not, you know, would not want to believe that that a man claiming to be on the male pill was really on the male pill. So, you know, it wouldn't
No, but
work anyway.
men don't want children more so than women don't want children, in my opinion. I think women are more likely to want children than men. So if men are more likely to take a pill to make sure that they don't have any children, you know, I think it would be a lot more, there would be a lot less illegitimate births if a birth control pill was accessible to both men and women. I think and it was inexpensive. I think you could get a lot of men to be on the birth control pill.
Yes, but the point is that women, if confronted by a man who said, "Oh, don't worry about it. If we don't have any contraception, I'm on the pill." So I'm saying she would be stupid to believe him
Well,
and
but
not
men
take
do it with
precautions
women
all the
all the
way.
time. Women tell men all the time I'm on the pill, and usually they are.
Yes, but if they don't trust a woman, they would just put on the condom anyway without even asking her.
Okay, there's tons and tons of women out there on birth control that are telling men they're on birth control and they are able to get them to have raw sex with them. So I don't think it'll be a problem.
Okay, I'm just saying that if you're a woman and you want to avoid pregnancy and a man is saying, "Don't worry about it, darling, I'm on the pill," she would be dumb to believe him.
But I think it's
It's
more
wrong.
likely that a man is on the pill. I think it's more likely for a woman to lie to say she's not on the pill than it is for a man to lie. I think a man is much more motivated to take the pill than a woman, only because, women often want to have a baby in order to kind of maybe, well, I guess maybe it goes both ways, but um I just think that the woman is more likely to want a child in the first place and more likely to keep a child. I think that men are less likely to want to get the woman pregnant that they're just sleeping with. If it's random sex, I think a man is going to be more cautious about producing a child than a woman just because of, they have to pay for it and, or just put it in both of their hands, have both men and women on birth control and, do most of the reproduction in these artificial wombs. Not totally. I do believe in keeping natural reproduction up and viable. I don't think we should all be coming out of artificial wombs, but you
Hmm.
know,
But I mean, I think you understand. My proposal. It's that well, if you have illegitimate offspring, then you are guilty of a sexual offence, and you will be punished. You know, um, publicly, and you won't like it, so you'll be careful if you're going to do it at all. And that's the whole purpose of it, of that law, to you know put people on notice that it's going to be considered a sexual offence if you have children outside wedlock. Because all these sort of theoretical forms of contraception and expecting people to practice it is not going to work in practice because people forget. But I mean, you do see
okay, well, there would be no illegitimacy if
If
Yeah, they
people were
would.
scared to have illegitimate offspring because of the punishment that this would attract, and that was what people feared in the olden days. But now the people who are illegitimate and the parents who have illegitimate offspring probably outnumber married parents. That is really the problem, and it can't be corrected in a democracy, which is why I say that, the party system would have to be abolished. And I rely on, George Washington's farewell speech when he warned against having political parties. But you can talk to people who kind of understand English, know what you're saying, and they still refuse to go the whole hog. I'm, of course, going to mention Carol again. She's the one who's really concerned about white people in America. But if push came to shove, she won't say, I want a one party state. And I say, but it's not just me who's saying it, it's George Washington, a founding father. And also, there's a verse in the Quran that wants people not to divide their religions into sects, and she just ignores all that. I mean that's our base, our division on secular Quranism, and I'm saying, you just need to say what you really need to make it work. So I can't compromise on these things, like, oh, I didn't really mean it about, um, treating unmarried parents as sex offenders, because then it wouldn't work, not even in theory. So, yeah, I'm just wondering about your opinion on that, really, Vincent.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, yeah, if you're not gonna do it the whole way, then it's not going to work. I mean, yeah, like, people forget, these Noahides forget that in order for the Noahide laws to work, you need to follow the seventh law. The seventh law is also, in and of itself, applicable, or a command. Like, they forget that, okay, no idolatry, no blah, I don't do any of that. But yeah, but you also have to set up courts of justice. And without that seventh law, without implementing that seventh law, the punishments, then the whole system is kind of just pointless, right?
No enforcement. Yeah, laws are used toothless. I mean, you can't even have a law if you say, oh, it's not written down anywhere, and nobody enforces it. We just sort of know. It's like, and this is what the Jews have been doing for centuries. You know, it's like, officially, there are 36 capital offences, and when you ask them, and they say, oh, no, 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 we don't do that. We never really did because we're such nice people, and we hardly ever enforce the death penalty, you know. And Gentiles have accepted their ridiculous explanation and excuses. Because if there's no penalty, then you think, well, there's no law against it, so I can do it then, can't I? And to me, because there's no law against it. And this is the common defense when people are told, not to do, whatever, and they say there's no law against it, is there? And therefore, if I do it, I'm not a criminal, am I?
No, I guess you're not. Well, yeah, I mean, well, that's the point. There's no enforcement. I mean, that's the problem with Christianity. Not only then there's no rules, there's no enforcement of any rules. I mean, they missed both the points, I mean, maybe Islam has rules, but maybe they're just not enforcing them, or whatever. But you know,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, okay. I'll even put my hands up on the interpretation of the commandments of Allah. So I've asked a bunch of Muslims who how many verses there are. Could they give me a list? Uh, and they all go, ooh, well, we've never really agreed. We believe there's about 500 of them, but we've never really agreed about the actual number of the verses, because um, I think the difficulty, okay, I mean, and I'm saying, it should be quite clear grammatically what is a command and what is a statement. Wouldn't you agree?
huh?
Because
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
sentences in any language are divided into I think it's exclamations, questions, commands, and statements. Maybe I'm missing something out, but you know, when we say something, there's usually a purpose to it, like, what are you doing, Vincent, or you know, can you, do this thing or don't do this thing, and the other one would be, to tell you something, the way to San Jose is, that away, and the fourth one is an exclamation, which is, how good of you to, you know, do whatever, or isn't the weather, wonderful today, something of that nature.
Hmm.
So you can apply the same rules to the Quran and just go through them. And it's like, is this a statement? Is this an exclamation? Is this a question? Is it a command? And you do it that way, and then work it out. But apparently, and I kind of concede that it's maybe not as easy as that, because if I were to say that, and I do say that the First Amendment is based on Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, which states there is no compulsion in belief. Truth stands clear from error, but that's a statement, isn't it? And so I looked at this website that has 7 English translations of any verse, and one of them says, "Let there be no compulsion in belief." But I don't know how much it agrees with the Arabic or whatever. But the point is that God has a view on compelling belief, because the narrative in the Quran is that He has given us free will, and some of us are just going to automatically believe, some of us are going to automatically disbelieve, and there's a whole bunch of people in the middle who could be persuaded either way. And that is basically how humanity is divided. And I think, if we tidied up our thinking, things would just become a whole lot clearer, and our governments a whole lot better. And the problem is people not wanting to admit mistakes. So my position is that, um, okay, yesterday I had this interesting chat on the G Block channel, and Veli we were talking about the story of creation, and Veli was saying, well, the Torah says, the universe was created in 7 days, in 6 days, sorry, 6 days, and on the seventh day God took a rest. And but the Quran is silent on that. It basically has a verse that talks about a singularity which God clove asunder. So, but I'm saying, well, that sounds like the Big Bang, doesn't it? So therefore, the Quran is more scientific than the Torah, and my narrative would be that, the story continues. The story of humanity is not, you know, written in stone and stuck forever. So Veli was saying, well, why the inconsistency? I mean, if God knew, then He wouldn't have, both would agree or something like that. And I'm saying that we should be able to, or Jews, religious Jews should be able to work out, if they've read the Quran, uh, which set of rules would be easier on them. Obviously the set of rules that doesn't have 36 capital offenses. And if both come from the same Abrahamic God, then it would be rational to choose the one without the 36 capital offenses, and which is less restrictive.
Well, they have already mitigated all that restricted stuff themselves. So the religion
With a
evolved.
Talmud, yes, with a
Yes, but
Talmud.
look, just like, okay, Christianity mitigated the Old Testament with the Old Testament with the New Testament. So, they said, okay, well, that's too hard and we can't do that. So let's just add this New Testament onto it, and it makes it easier. And instead of doing that, the Jews just said, well, this is, let's just do what's it called? Interpret this. There has to be interpretation, and so, they just said, let's just interpret this, and in such ways that we're able to actually accomplish this. And they have a working system for both themselves and the Gentiles. There's no need for the Jews. The Jews have already mitigated their religion. There's no need for them to become Muslims. They're not under strict rules anymore. And there's no need for the Gentiles for Islam because Noahide is not like super strict that you can't uphold it. It's not so strict that you can't do it. There's nothing overbearing about modern Judaism and Noahidism. It's just not overbearing like that.
Well, I mean, were you aware that Orthodox Jews regard um, Reform Jews as heretics? Did you know that? Because I didn't realize that until, well, years after I started taking an interest in
Well,
Judaism.
yes, of course, I would think that they would believe that Orthodox Jews would believe that secular Jews are heretics. Of course, I would believe that.
Yes, because the Torah says that any Jew who breaks the Sabbath, take him out of the city gates and stone him, because that is one of the capital offences.
Oh,
So
yes, but
anything that attracts you know, the death penalty is heretical.
well, yeah, I don't think the Sabbath is mitigated. I think that yes, Jews still have to keep the Sabbath, but I mean, if you're a Jew breaking the Sabbath, then yes, I guess technically. I mean, I was talking to Joshua Shalit about it. Um, I don't think you could be tried in a Noahide court for that, but Noahides could bring a Jew forth to a Jewish court. Um, a, a Noahide court, from what Joshua Shalit said, would be able to try a Jew if they broke one of the seven Noahide laws. So if they broke Sabbath, no, 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 no. If they broke idolatry, but Sabbath is specifically a Jewish law. So I think that they can only be tried in a Jewish court for breaking a Jewish law. But, again, keeping the Sabbath is not the hardest thing on earth to do. I mean, modern Jews are not called to do on anything all that difficult. So they don't need Islam. They've taken care of it themselves in their own
Well,
way.
but you know that Jewry don't agree with each other about how they interpret certain verses. So that's why you have the
Neither
ultra
so do
orthodox.
Muslims. So do Muslims. They don't all agree on how to interpret verses.
Well, I'm saying that the uh, divisions in Jewry are much greater than in it is than amongst Muslims. So basically, I think you would have to agree with me that Muslims who call themselves Muslims would just be more likely to do the thing and say they believe in God and fast and and pray and all that. But Jews, you don't even know if a Jew is a secular Jew or okay. We know that the about evenly divided, like 50-50-50. So
Well,
about half the
I'm
Judaism
sorry,
are
no, no. There's
secular.
secular Muslims and Muslims who are not very religious and who don't follow anything or anything like that. So, I mean, that it's not like all Muslims are religious and following the rules, but every sect of Judaism that's out there is working for Jews. There's nothing that's not working for them. So, just there's no reason to become Muslim.
Okay, this is assuming that each religion is sort of complete on its own, but obviously it isn't, because if you're an adherent of one of the Abrahamic faiths, you have to think of, well, if you're Christian, it's like, well, there is the Old Testament, and you're also aware these Muslims are saying that their holy book supersedes your holy book, and their religion supersedes your religion, meaning it's meant to replace it. So you will have to be looking closely at all the rivals, and be
Yeah,
saying,
I know. And the right, and all you have to do is very easily dismiss the Quran as just an obvious forgery of Torah and a watering down of Torah. Look, the Muslims did the same thing to the Torah that the Jews did, except the Muslims said God told us to do this. So, I mean, it's nonsense. The idea that the Muslims additions or subtractions from Torah are legit because they run around telling everyone that it was God that made it. That does No, God didn't made it. You made that up. Just you made it up. Just like the rabbis interpret it in the Talmud, you made it up. You made up that God didn't tell you to do that. You just made it up.
okay, but I mean, understandably, the Jews would say that the the Quran is a false revelation, because
Yeah.
because they don't want their Torah to be superseded by the Quran.
There's no
And
need for it to be superseded by the Quran.
what do you mean?
There's no need, especially look, rabbinical Judaism had already been invented, so everything was fine. All they had to do was spread the Noahide laws. They hadn't got there yet, but I mean, if they had done that, then everything would have just been hunky dory, and that's why it's going to become hunky dory because now they are spreading the Noahide laws. Once Jews spread the Noahide laws, there's no need for Islam. There's no need for it. It's just superfluous and
Yeah, but
annoying.
the story hasn't. It's not over yet, because I'm predicting that Muslims will be telling Jews that what they're doing is, well, not appropriate, not necessary, and possibly offensive to God if He exists.
It's not offensive to God.
Yes, it would, because if it is true,
But it's
that God
not.
revealed, okay, you're assuming it's not, but there's a whole bunch of Muslims in the world, and
Who
their
cares
numbers.
what they think?
Well, because they are a powerful group, and a lot of them. So
Well,
they
they're
would say,
wrong.
well, you can say that they're wrong, but I imagine if you're being rational about it, people will say, well, still these Muslims exist, and people are scared of them, and you've already admitted
Okay,
that you're scared of them.
yes, of course I'm scared of them, but I think most non-Muslims think that Muslims are wrong. So I don't think that, oh, they're going to say, oh, look at Muslims. This must mean that the Quran is true. I think they look at Muslims and they say, no, this must mean the Quran is not true. You know,
Well, if you're an atheist, you would assume that all all the scripture is not true. Particularly the ones that are believed by Jews and Muslims to come from God, because you say, well, actually, Moses. Well, I mean, they're saying Moses wrote it, right? They're saying Moses wrote the Torah.
yeah.
Um, so, um, but I mean, I guess people say, well, it was written long after Moses died, or something of that nature, or that Moses never really existed and it's just a story. But people can deny all these stories, and it's difficult to prove that he really existed. I mean, the only thing you can say is, well, lots of people know about it and lots of people believe it's true, and it's just opinion. But I mean, these stories have caught our imagination because it's useful. These stories are useful in making us take an interest in the laws. Because, all stories about Moses, end in the Ten Commandments. It's like that's where it came from. Came from God, who gave it to Moses on Mount Sinai after he took the, Jews out of Egypt. And that was, that's a story of the Jews. I mean, there's always a story. I mean, even liberalism has a kind of story.
Yeah,
the
but
now.
Muslim stories are so busted and obviously contrived and like, you
Which ones?
know, I refuse to believe, according to Islam, Islam was given to Adam and it existed all the way like up into, well, so according to them, Ishmael brought, or what is it? Ishmael brought Islam to Saudi Arabia. The point is that they were all in Saudi Arabia. I'm supposed to believe that prior to Muhammad, there were all pagans there. It was all pagan. And I'm supposed to believe that all these pagans, centuries earlier or a few generations earlier, were all Muslims. And then they all forgot that they were Muslims. And there was no record of anything about Islam in Saudi Arabia anywhere. And then it just suddenly reappeared when Muhammad came. I don't believe that they were
I
Muslims down.
okay, I don't know about that story.
No, the story is that the Arabs were practicing Islam, but then they lapsed into paganism, and then Muhammad came and uh brought back
Reminded them
Islam.
of okay, I didn't know that story.
Okay, that's a retarded story. There's no evidence. There's absolutely no evidence these people were practicing Islam before paganism. I mean, there's nothing. They were pagans.
Okay, that's why okay, I agree with you. I mean, but I, in a way, the narrative isn't really that important. You just kind of pretend to believe in the narrative, because it suits your purpose. Because you want to be Muslim, you want to obey the laws. You're gonna say, yes, I believe, the story in the Quran, right? I mean, it's just a kind of flag of convenience, isn't it? Because you want to obey the laws, you say, well, I want to obey this system because it's the best system, and it's the best system because God created it, and that means you trump all the arguments of lesser systems created by man. I mean, it's like atheists who say, in order to deny God, they have to say that the universe was uncreated and has always been there. You know, and thus obviate the need for a creator of the universe because it was already there. It
Okay,
doesn't need.
even if you do believe there's a creator, it is still arrogant to say it's male or female or what it wants and doesn't want and the history that it's provided for all of us. That's very arrogant. You can say, well, you know what? I believe that there must be some kind of creator. I don't know who it is. I don't know what they want. I don't know anything about them, but there must be some kind of creator. Why can't you leave it at that?
Because people will be just pushing the Bible and the Quran at you and say, well, this is the narrative of the God who
No,
created the
I'm yeah,
universe.
I know, but that doesn't mean that it's true just because they're pushing it at you. I mean, I'm saying these people are arrogant for even coming up with this mythology.
Well, because the argument, okay, what you have is somebody saying, I don't know, maybe yes, maybe not. And then the other narrative is strong, saying, I know, and it was God.
Well,
So,
I think that yeah, but there's also like limitations to that, and that the whole world doesn't hate agnostics, right? Like half of the world, like people don't hate agnostics, but people hate Islam, people hate Christianity, people hate Judaism. It has a lot of enemies because it created a narrative that you can poke holes through, and it's also a narrative which causes problems for people. So it's not like these narratives are so absolutely wonderful and the whole world is just going to choose them over agnosticism, and especially in the modern era I think in the modern era people are more agnostic than they are listening to the Bible or the Quran.
I understand, but there's a purpose behind accepting these narratives. So, you said people don't like, the adherents of the Abrahamic religions. I guess they don't like Muslims because, Muslims have their rules and they want to go on about them. And, people who don't like rules would reject it. And I guess Christians, who have acquired three global empires have been, kicking people around, killing them, killing each other. So that might be a reason why non-Christians wouldn't like Christians. And as for Jews, I guess Christians and Muslims envy Jews because they were supposed to be the first people with revealed revelation. So, I mean, presumably that's why Gentiles envy Jews. Like,
Well, they're
they got it
stupid if they
first.
envy them. To even believe that there was a divine revelation, it's stupid. It's so stupid to be like, oh, there was a divine revelation and it was given to Jews, and so therefore I'm jealous. You know what I mean? Like,
But
that's
it's so obvious that okay, so much expression of anti-Semitism is because, oh, but Jews are so cohesive and they're so smart and they have this religion and they hate us with their religion and they get away with murder with their, that's how they think, these anti-Semites. So, I guess they do envy Jews.
well, they
I
shouldn't
think,
envy them, and they're prisoners of their own stupidity if they believe that God chose them or that they got the first revelation on earth. And if they're jealous because they're following that narrative, then they're stupid. I mean, if they're jealous of Jews because Jews are smart and Jews have a lot of power, well, then maybe. But if you're sitting around believing in the narrative of God and because of God, you're jealous of the Jews, then that's just those people are stupid.
yeah, but there's so many stupid people around, and a lot of them don't even know why they feel, what they feel, except their sort of emotions. I mean, it takes a while to work them out, but it's possible that, it's just unacknowledged envy. Because, maybe you also sort of know that if you say you envy somebody, you're saying, I envy them because they're superior to me. They have things I don't have, but I want, and I wasn't given it. And that's why I envy, your beauty, your intellect, your nice holidays, your, you know, all these things that I might, somebody else might envy you for. But they don't want to acknowledge it. They'll just say, oh, it's because, Vincent is a rotten person and he's this and he's that. But they wouldn't actually admit that is because they envy you.
I
I mean,
don't envy the Jews.
I don't.
I don't envy them. I'm scared of them, and I think that whatever their essence, it is the antithesis of what I am.
Okay. I mean,
Like it's just it's they are my antithesis. It's not jealousy, and they're my antithesis, and they're a strong antithesis, and they have a lot of power, and they have a lot of ability, and they're very smart and very capable, and so I very much scared of them. I don't, you know, and even, you know, I've always said I don't care that Jews spread liberalism. I care that yeah, secular Jews tend to spread like socialism and communism and leftism and stuff like that, which okay, like I would think leftist Jews are disproportionately behind the calls to say, that there's no distinction between men and women, and that, men can get pregnant or males can get pregnant, and, these different kinds of things, and that there's just, there's no such thing as gender, as if there's no such thing as gender. I think there's a lot of leftist Jews behind that. Um, Maybe disproportionately, but I mean, I can maybe that's like, one thing I can point to that I can point to that and I can say, well, I don't like that liberal Jews do that, but there's also lots of liberal white people and liberal black people and liberal Asian people that are promoting that too. So it's not like it's just the Jews, but you know, I only complain about one thing with the Jews, and I don't go into all the other stuff. I think that, you know, they're never going to win because that book Rabbi by Rabbi Watan, my favorite, a program for Jews and all anti-Semites. Um, he said, well, why do people attack the Jews? Because they're behind democracy and equality for women and equality for all races and, this kind of stuff. And, so then what happens is when you attack the Jews, you attack everybody. He said you make when you attack the Jews on for the reasons that because they're behind democracy and women's rights and racial rights and stuff. So then not only do you make enemies of the Jews, you make enemies of women and gays and racial people and all this other kind of stuff. And so they'll never win because they turn against all of society. I mean, their whole thing is like the Jews are letting in all the other races and the gays and giving women all the power. So, women are gonna be like, well, I'm on the side of the Jews, and gays are gonna be like, oh, I'm on the side of the Jews, and all these other minorities are gonna be on the side of the Jews. And, I don't attack the Jews for that. I mean, I if you attack the Jews for Noahitism, gays would be on your side, women would be on your side, racial minorities, would be on your side, but that's not what they hate the Jews for. They hate the Jews for the wrong reasons.
Hmm. Um, there's somebody in the chat called Learned Elders of Timo. I think he's ultimated Judeo-Christian, and I posted the link, so he may come. I recognize his modus operandi. Can you see what he says?
Yeah, our God of the Bible exists. What is your response? I don't no, but his whole theory is God exists because God exists.
Well, I mean, your response, if you're an atheist, would say, "I deny that God exists."
No,
What
my
is your
response is
response?
I don't know what that God exists, and I'm not looking for a goddamn response because I know anything you tell me about knowing that God exists is just absurd.
Yes, I mean, my response would be, "What is your evidence that God exists?" He
That is
says
not
it's not a
a
defeater.
defeater. I know, whatever that means, it's not a defeater. It's your proposition is not, it's just it's just a proposition without any, the proposition that God exists is just as valid as the proposition that God does not exist.
Here, here. So you
Yeah.
have to use arguments to say he exists or prove he doesn't. That's
But yeah,
how
but
it's done.
these are none of these arguments have ever been fruitful throughout all of civilization because there's no answer to these things. It's all just speculation.
Well, it necessarily has to be because even according to the narrative of the Abrahamic God, according to the 13 principles of Judaism, it says that God cannot, doesn't take material or physical form. It is nothing like we have ever seen. And we won't meet God in our lifetimes. That is, the other statement about God. You will not be meeting him in your lifetime unless you are a prophet.
Hmm.
So within this rule system, you can't say, you can't say, aha, God doesn't exist. I mean, you can say, oh, but he's so evil and he's let all these, evil things happen. But then there's also an explanation. It's like, well, these things are sent to try us. I don't think he'll join us, which is a shame.
It is him because his God is ultimate truthful love. That's what God is ultimate truthful love. I remember he said it a million times.
Yes. Yes. And,
God
and
is
it makes
ultimate.
no sense. You know,
It's just
it's
blubber.
nonsensical.
It's blubber. It's just like God is love. Like, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously it's important to him that he believes in God. And for some people, they think, oh, I just couldn't live if I didn't believe in God anymore. So for some
Oh, I
people,
know. And that his other thing, like, okay, he's like, oh, well, using the New Testament, why does he use the New Testament? Like, how do we know we're supposed to use the Testament? How do we not know we're not supposed to use the Old Testament only? And he said, well, we have to use Scripture as it is, the Bible as it is today. Like, who said that? Like, who said that we have to use the Bible as it is today rather than the Hebrew Bible?
yeah, and you would have thought that in a rational world, the word of God would trump the word of mortal and fallible men. And even Christians don't claim that the New Testament was written by anyone other than mortal and fallible men. So
What's gish galloping? He told me I'm gish galloping.
I don't know if he's accusing me or you of gish galloping. Gish galloping is just making a lot of arguments at the same time in quick succession, talking very quickly, and not allowing the person to whom you've addressed these arguments at any time to respond to them at all before making another series of complicated uh, and complex claims.
Okay, I read that now. I'm not gish galloping. I don't even let him on. I mean, these people are so lacking in intelligence and academic integrity. Um, they're so lacking in yeah, integrity, and they really have no. I mean, these people should just be totally. I can't believe they have any power. They just have to be totally and royally dismissed. At least now, this type of talk is only found on the internet. Like, people don't feel comfortable talking about this kind of stuff. Like, I'm sure he's not like off the internet talking about God being truthful love and how God exists. And I mean, people get into these personal conversations, but I mean, it's what I'm trying to say is that this is a lot less considered to be standard thinking than it used to be. I mean, everyone used to be Christian, so, that's the way it used to be for everyone. But now these Christians are just going to have to learn that a lot of the population no longer believes in their BS, including this guy, Ultimated Judaism.
Mm. But I've noticed that it's being discussed a bit more, like modern day debate. They talk about, well, they seem to talk about religion, because people are, I guess, when they get frightened, they will go to religion as a source of comfort and certainty. And I
Yes,
think,
well, I mean, this needs to be rubbished. I mean, the thing is, I really think that atheists and others have done a really bad job, or anti-Christians have done a really bad job at dissecting down these arguments and showing how horrible they are. There needs to be books upon books and volumes upon volumes dissecting the Bible and the Quran and showing where all their inaccuracies are and or all their immoralities are. And really, really go through scientifically through these religions and break them down in order to show that these people are so foolish. And it just needs to be done repeatedly. The thing is that the other side, the atheist side, doesn't sit around repeatedly, destroying their arguments. They just kind of, they don't do it with the same fervor. I mean, the other side, like, this ultimated Judaism, they just repeat this nonsense over and over and over and over until people just believe it. And the atheists just and their argument these arguments are more complicated. It takes a little bit more education and knowledge, in order to believe that. I mean, it's thinking versus blindly believing what you're reading, and it's harder to think than it is to just blindly believe.
Mm, hmm. But I think people are interested in religion because they are scared, and it's something to do with Jews. I mean, I guess if you're Christian or Muslim, because these people are obsessed with Jews because they think whatever they suffer, it's been caused by them. I guess Muslims just can't get over the fact that Israel is a liberal democracy in the middle of the Middle East, and just thinking of Jews in Israel just makes them break out in a cold sweat and want to kill them or something. And I suppose they can't bear the idea that Jews are seem to have gotten the upper hand over them. I think
Well,
that is basically what drives them
it's
crazy.
their own fault. It's the way that they react because they're ignoble. Because, because first of all, in the Middle Ages, Jews were not running around spreading liberalism. That they were in their own communities, excuse me. They were in their own communities, they were Orthodox, they were religious, and the only reason that these people were really attacked was because they weren't Christians, right? I mean, that was like the whole thing. That's ignoble to, just go attacking people because they're not Christians. So that was like, the first thing. And now it's because they're liberals that they're going after them. The people who go against after Jews are not noble people. If you're going after Jews because they're helping women get equal rights, then you're not a noble person.
Well, I think it's because liberalism is breaking down, and because liberalism is like, this conceptual idol to Westerners, they don't want to blame liberalism. They want to think well of liberalism because it's their tradition, it's their intellectual, political tradition, and they can't bear to think that it was wrong, you know, ab initio, from the beginning it was wrong. So they just think, oh, it's those Jews, they destroyed liberalism, it was working fine. And I guess, before that they will be saying Christianity was working fine until, the Jews came over. It's that sort of thing. But I mean, obviously Christianity was not working fine, or it wouldn't have been replaced by liberalism, isn't it? I
Right.
mean, you're a liberal, so maybe we can talk about that.
Well, no, I mean, I mean, that's why I don't get angry at Jews for being liberals. I don't, I just don't get angry at Jews for being liberals.
Well, because it's quite tempting. I mean, it's mainstream, so you can understand why everybody who lives in the West, be they white or non-white, will think, well, I want to fit in. Liberalism is great. I mean, when, it was generally accepted to be superior to everything. Um, so, it would be, part of Western identity. And now something has gone wrong and people don't quite know what to think anymore. But I mean, I would say that, so what if liberalism has been around for 250 years? I mean, if you examine its origins, it was bound to fail because liberalism comes from the ideas of the French Revolution. They were not intellectuals. They just said what they wanted. They wanted equality, they wanted liberty, and they wanted fraternity. And
Hello? You've blacked out.
that's what they said. I mean, you can't make that liberalism is not viable in the long term as a political ideology. That was what I was saying. And it was bound to fail because a political ideology is more than, the French revolutionaries just giving us a tick list of what they want from their
Yeah,
government.
you're right.
And 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 I think since the success of the French Revolution, conservatism was this sort of thing that nobody quite dared to really examine, because conservatism was basically, all the stuff from Christianity: no sex before marriage, you know um, and no sex with anybody from the same sex, and that was the rule. And once this the belief in God had been overturned, people just didn't see why there shouldn't be sex outside marriage. And so they, did those things, and now they're hooked on it and they can't give it up. But they sort of know that only Islam would make them give it up, and they hate the idea. But in the meantime, they can blame the Jews.
Right.
Yeah, because conservatism is kind of, well, I don't know, the ideology of the party pooper. So the Conservatives said, no, 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 we can't have sex, before marriage, and then and they'd be asked, well, why not? And they would be able to answer properly, other than, well, God says not to. But then, after people had stopped believing in God, it wasn't much of an argument anymore. So basically, for the past 250 years, it's all these liberals saying, why don't we do this? Why don't we, I don't know, do all the, bad things? Why don't we have a party? Why don't we party until the cops come? Why don't we drive to the edge of the cliff? Why don't we drive off the edge of the cliff and see what happens? Because we're empiricists, aren't we? I mean, that
Um,
that was kind of one of the arguments I was using yesterday on on G Block. I mean, in that empiricism was a way for for people who want to deny God to deny God. It's like, well, I haven't seen God. Have you? Well, I'll believe him when I see him.
it's just, they really, really, really just extrapolate a lot out of the sentence that God exists. I mean, you really have no right to go as far as you do in saying all these things about God's laws, and it's just not something you should be doing, and nobody should be doing it. And, you know,
Why
at
not?
least, well, I don't think anybody should be. It's just you can't make up rules and say that there's a God who said this, because you really can't prove that. Why don't you just make up rules? Like, why did they have to make up God? Why couldn't they just been like, you know what, these are a really good set of rules to live by, because if we live by this, we're gonna have a more stable and orderly society.
Well, it's obvious now, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it, it's like, well, all the five world religions support the institution of marriage and family values. They do. I mean, and then you think, well, why did all these secular political ideologies go by the wayside? Communism and fascism and Nazism, and the answer, the ready answer, must be that they didn't really support the institution of marriage.
Of
So
course they
that's
did. The
why,
Nazis supported the institution of marriage.
no, they had Lebensborn, which is basically a knocking shop for SS officers. Like,
I know, but that wasn't their main agenda. They were very family oriented and family valued, and they wanted women to have 4 children and stuff like that. So,
well, actually, you may not have read the autobiography of, I forget the name now, but she was Hitler's secretary. And so she basically wrote a short biography of what it was like to know Hitler. And it seems that Hitler was always making little jokes about having an abortion, because she was saying, well, I was ill for a few days, and when I turned up to work, Hitler made a joke about me having an abortion, and that was why I was away for a few days. That was, yeah. So,
Odd.
we kind of know that the Weimar Republic was quite sexually liberated, don't we?
Yes, it was. It was very sexually liberated.
But probably, probably not for good reasons. It was probably, well, we're completely destitute, so what can we do but to turn a trick if you're female, to sell one's body to the night?
Well, I mean, it wasn't just prostitution that was going on. I mean, people were sexually liberal just for the sake of being sexually liberal. I mean, it was just that's just the way it was. And
But don't you see that it's kind of really all about sex? I mean, if you look at, if you go down the list of the 36 capital offenses of the Torah, it's like, well, 17 of them are basically sexual offenses. So, if we are to respect the institution of marriage, it would have the effect of being eugenic, which is basically, the whole purpose of breeding humans. We have to breed humans eugenically, and the idea is that not everybody has a right to sexual reproduction, but if they can't find anyone to marry them, they're not supposed to have children. So, so marriage has been a filter, a eugenic filter for the next generation.
no, it's not eugenic because people who are dysgenic marry each other all the time. And what makes you there's plenty of dysgenic men that have money that are able to get women to marry them. There's plenty of, you know,
What do you mean
you
by
know,
dysgenic?
there's
What do you mean by dysgenic men? Can you give an example?
physically unhealthy and ugly and perhaps not even that smart, but they still have money or not that noble of a person or good of a person, yet they have lots of money and so they're able to get whoever they want, or just two low lives that they're both low lives. Like
Yes.
that marry each other. That's not eugenic. Marriage doesn't promote eugenics because if everyone's getting married, there's no quality, there's no direction in heterosexual monogamous marriages. There's no weeding and selecting and pairing and anything like that.
The
There's not none
process
of that.
itself is eugenic, don't you see?
No, you
If
just
you're looking for, okay, if you're looking for a wife, what, just assume you were, let's pretend you're heterosexual. What kind of woman would you choose?
Well, it
If you
doesn't matter
had
what
to
kind of
pick.
woman I would choose. It's the type of woman that would marry me. And if I'm a low end man, I'm only going to get a low end woman to marry me.
Okay, but let's assume the world's your oyster and you can choose. What would you choose?
Of course, you would choose attractive, but
Yes.
for most people, the world is not their oyster. That's just wishful thinking.
No, it's not wishful thinking. I mean, obviously, for women, they'd like a prince because they read all those fairy stories when they were little girls. Okay, they want a prince who's tall, dark, and handsome, and because he's a prince, he would be loaded and have high status. Yes, and of course, the next thing would be he would be kind and he would be loving and won't cheat on them and won't hit them and that sort of, and they'll be happy and he'll want to make them happy. And it's like, okay, as you get older, well, he doesn't have to be a prince, not really. Maybe if he's got a good job, that'll do. If he's not, if he's not insane, if he's not a criminal, eventually, you will lower your standards. But obviously, we're going to go for the best one we can get, right?
Yeah, the best you can get, which might not be that great.
I know, but then the alternative might be worse because it's like, oh, nobody will marry me. That means I'll have no children, and and people will think, that there's something wrong with me because nobody will marry me. Because all
Well,
these sort of preoccupations of status and what people think will impel people to do, what they consider to be normal.
well, I mean, there's not really it doesn't really siphon off that many people, to be honest with you. I mean, the only people it siphons off are people who aren't able to get married, but that's not, the majority of the population. Those are only the most extreme cases, like you're morbidly obese or you're almost mentally retarded or, you know,
But Vincent, when Westerners respected the institution of marriage, they had a higher IQ, didn't they? And in the last century, it's dropped by 14 points. I think it's something surely to do with their propensity to respect, the institution of marriage. Because, that's one of the, um, what's the word, desirable, heritable traits that you want to be able to transmit to the next generation: intelligence. So I've been explaining to Stephen J. James that, white people are in trouble because, out of all the races in the world, they're more likely to be gay and non-parents. And if they have, clever women and clever men, they're more likely not to marry because, the clever women who go to university and pursue a career will, suddenly find themselves on the shelf after, at 40, and it'll be too late for them to have children. And then for attractive white Western men, they'll think, well, why marry? I mean, all these women just throw themselves at me. I can just keep pumping and dumping them, and they'll still keep throwing themselves at me. So there's no need for me to marry, and they don't marry, or if they do, they'll find it very difficult to settle down and be, loyal to just one woman, and their marriages will break down with all the predictable consequences for their offspring. And if they do marry, they're more likely to marry out. So there they are. Well, these forces against white people getting their act together. And also, they're the ones most hooked on the idea of sex outside marriage. It's probably a behavioral addiction or some kind of psychological sense of entitlement. And they're not going to change until and unless they say, oh, we did wrong and we're going to stop doing this wrong thing, and we're going to repent and do shuva, as Jews might say. And repentance has four steps, which is cessation, con- um, confession, resolution, and what's the word? Compensation, redemption. I think redemption. Just trying to put right what you did wrong.
mm,
Well, anyway, sounds like you understand, even if you don't quite like it.
um, we just need something different, Claire. For the first time in human history, we just need to do it differently. We have the science, we have the technology, or at least we're almost there. We just need to organize differently. And once we have artificial wombs, we don't need to worry. And everyone's on birth control. We don't need to worry about this kind of stuff.
Well,
Okay, we don't need to worry We don't need to worry. And once we're able to genetically engineer our children, we don't need to worry about fucking IQ dropping. Science is the answer. Okay, futurism is the answer. We have futuristic problems, so we need futuristic solutions. And it's not going back to traditional marriage. Nobody fucking wants that.
Well, it's the only way to
No,
restore.
it's not the
You
only way. Science is the best way.
Well, science has. Okay, what can science do? Okay, you're going to say let's have all these artificial wombs, and we're going to have these labs, and we're going to put our fetuses into it, and it's like it's going to take a while. In the meantime, your well, your population is being demographically destroyed.
Well, that's why you have to do it very quickly, and you have to do it very quickly. And also, I mean, you want to promote the other things at the same time, like, normal breeding. I mean, you don't want that to cease until you have everything up and operating. But yeah, this has to be done very quickly. It's an emergency, and we need to put all of our time, effort, and powers. And also, your way is not going to work overnight because number one, there's no way that that legislation to publicly whip uh, unwed parents is not going to be on the laws on the books anytime soon. I would think we would sooner create artificial wombs before we had laws about whipping unmarried parents in public. So your way is not going to do it any faster.
Okay, thank you for raising the question of how I'm going to accomplish all this. I mean, obviously, I would need people about me to help me, and but I'm saying if they were willing to help me, it could be done very quickly, and everything would be done by Christmas if I had control of the media.
But you don't.
But I don't. But in theory, what it requires is somebody in the BBC or somewhere like a media outlet like that to say, oh, this looks very bad for us. We better do something about it. And well, why don't we ask her more questions to test her idea? And then I guess I'll be called in for an interview. I have to. I'll just explain my ideas a bit more. It will be propagated and people can just discuss it and agree or disagree, and that's how these things are done. But I have all other kinds of entertaining ways to make the story or the narrative more attractive. You know, incentivizing schemes for incentivizing people to adopt it, even unmarried mothers. Prizes and stuff. And maybe prizes for homosexuals who see my point before other homosexuals see my point. Who's going to be the first in the scramble for secular Quranism before it becomes mainstream? Will it be you, Vincent?
No, it's not going to be me. I mean, I'm not I'm not doing that. It's just doesn't work for me. I don't like the idea.
If I bribed you, you'd do it. If I gave you
No,
$1 million, you'd say, yes, all right, I'll be your
no,
poster boy, your gay poster boy for secular Quranism.
no, no, I
Yes.
wouldn't.
But
I
I'm not
mean,
allowed to bribe any of you. Not that I have the money. You have to do it for genuine reasons. Yeah, I bet if I, just came to your house with a suitcase full of dollars, you'd do it.
I hope not.
Oh, because you wanted to buy all those clothes.
Yeah, I know. I have to buy new clothes. I do have to buy new clothes. No, well, sometimes I have to buy some new clothes.
But obviously, all these are okay. So talking about new ideas, I think Hitler. I seem to remember him saying, things about, well, all these new ideas. It's very difficult getting people interested because, well, I mean, people are scared. They don't want to be, on their own, defending some fringe idea and being mocked by their, friends and family and colleagues, even if they didn't get cancelled, they don't want to be in that position. So the first few people who join a new idea, support a new idea, they'd have to be, quite independent and, uh, well, have some degree of conviction. So somebody has joined us. M Man. Okay, but there's a way of doing it, and I'm not quite sure how. Okay, I think this is how to do it. Hello? Well, I've kicked him. Vincent?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think it's a question of, people. Okay, if you knew for sure that secular Quranism was going to become mainstream, you'd do it, wouldn't you? I mean, you're just saying, oh, she's not. It's not going to happen. That's why I'm not going to.
No, I don't. I don't want secular Quranism to go mainstream. I think that would be horrible.
But okay, let's assume you knew it was going to become mainstream. You'd have to. You might think, oh well, if you can't beat them, join them. And if I'm one of the early birds, I'll get an early bird discount or something.
Per discount. Um,
Because it would be so good if you did become a secular Qur'anist. But obviously, if you're going to get some, lab job, you probably don't want to be, seen to be too wacky, I suppose. Not that secular Quranism is wacky, but, it is fringe.
yeah,
But
well,
you
I
see,
have my
it's very easy to win arguments using its values and belief system. And some people might just enjoy that. It's like, ooh, I really love the way I can so easily win arguments using that. It beats being, called, an anti-Semite, an Islamophobe, a racist, a Nazi, and, all the usual things that people get called when they, um, you know, try and argue in favor of social conservatism. And you can use arguments like a lawyer. Oh yeah, yeah. People were so surprised. Oh, that melanated goddess woman. She was really surprised that you and I were regular streaming partners.
yes, yes, I know. Yes, melanated goddess is another low intelligence creature.
Well, it's not quite true to say that, yeah, just because she didn't start playing with her sex organs from a young age like you,
No,
that
no, just her analogies and the conclusions she come to just show she has such a lack of intelligence.
well, I mean, it was true that she said that, if there was some child who was acting out some sex act or something at school, they had a duty, a positive duty to, call in social services or something. So,
The child, I mean, the child could just be. I naturally, I told you, I naturally performed not hardcore sex acts, but sexual, sexual closeness with other children, and I wasn't being molested.
mm, I mean, unfortunately, these days, children have a lot of access to porn, and they would probably be, acting on what they saw in the porn that they.
No, oh, come on. I'm saying most kids who are sexual young weren't molested. Okay? Like it's just it's natural. I mean, It's like, do you know that little boys get erections and that they can touch it and it feels good? You know that, right?
I read about that.
Yeah, well, it's true. I used to get erections when I was 3 and 4 years old. I remember I used to tell my mom, "Mommy, my pee-pee's hard," and she would be like, "Yeah." My mom would be like, "Yeah, that happens sometimes." I was, yeah, like little boys get erections. They don't know what they are, but they know if they play with them, it feels good. Like little boys like playing with their penises. They just like to do it.
Yeah, because if your sex organs are kind of sticking out, um, yeah, I guess that'd be a kind of natural thing to do. But then I suppose if your parents caught you doing that, they'd tell you not to.
Yeah, I guess. Well, no, it's normal for little boys to play with their penis because they're investigating it. So it's not very, especially for a young child, if they're just kind of playing with it in their hands and looking at it and moving it around and manipulating it. I mean, I wouldn't tell them not to do it. They're just learning about their penis.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, and this thing, like, I couldn't believe that they were saying I was molested because my father took a bath with me when I was like 2 or 3 years old.
Well, they were saying that in their culture, they've never had a bath with their dad,
Well, I don't,
and then they were
that's
talking about, well, how appropriate it is for that to happen. And this is a cultural thing, and then they're saying, well, in their culture, the only person who would bathe them would be their mother or some female relation, because their father wouldn't be doing anything like that because he'd be too busy earning a living or whatever. But yeah, it's a cultural thing, and maybe there should be boundaries. But yes, I mean, look, there'll be some people who will be incorrigibly heterosexual. There will be people who will be incorrigibly homosexual, and the people in the middle who could swing both ways, I guess.
right.
But obviously, when we talk about the health of our society, we're talking about ourselves collectively as a group. And oh yeah, talking about groups. I mean, this is what I was, I was trying to say that I thought, okay, I'm going to be promoting G Block because I think it, the content is far superior than any white nationalist group because it's got a range of people, not all of whom are unmarriageable bachelors. Some of them have good jobs, some of them are chads and have a string of women, apparently, and some of them are fathers, and they talk about subjects that are wide ranging and and inquiring, which is kind of better than all the other nationalist streams that I hear. And I guess
I
they don't
think,
like hearing that.
yeah, I know. Well, I can't listen to any of them. I try. I mean, I try to go, people are like, I try to listen, but I just have no interest. I
Mhm.
really have no interest in their topics or the way they present themselves or anything
Mhm.
like that. I mean, they're just half of it is not even really being on the topic, but just being joking and being theatrical and trying to be funny and stuff like that. And, it's not a wholly serious.
But sometimes it is serious. I mean, people do talk about their lives and their experiences, and I have no reason to think that they're lying. And I guess you take them more seriously than people who well, I'm trying to compare it with I don't know maybe David and Jen, you know, because yes, of course David and Jen are real people who exist, but in a way you can't take them seriously because they don't seem to have any private life. Or there's just a way out that you.
Mm,
Have you been listening? Oh, I meant to ask you about the chat GPT thing. Do you know
the
anything about it?
the what?
Is chat GPT? People talking
No,
about it lots. No, apparently you can
no.
chat to this AI bot. And I tried a few
Oh,
times, but I think they censor even that. Oh, we've got 8 people now. That's nice. 9 people.
oh, really? 9 people listening. That's an audience.
Yes. And Tinkle Tingle asks, is MDMA allowed under secular Quranism? I haven't really decided about drugs. I used to think that I was going to allow everything, and then um, operate a 3 strikes and you're out policy on people who commit criminal offences while they're intoxicated or addicted. So if you're an addict and you commit 3 offences, you'd be executed, and then the problem would be solved. So I used to think that, but now I'm not so sure. I don't know. Um, so that's my position. And I've got a question from Tinkle Tink again. Is it secular Quranism and Israeli characteristics? Now, what are the Israeli characteristics? Thank you for your question. Tomorrow I will be speaking on the Sula channel, and it's spelled Sulha, and the title is WTF is secular Quranism. So that should be an interesting discussion. As for the Israeli characteristics, I mean, it would be up to Israelis to decide. I've been trying to sell secular Quranism with American characteristics, and there's been a bit of difficulty because Carol won't go the whole hog and say it's going to be a one-party theocracy. But then I'm not American; I can only make recommendations. But I thought to myself, if this thing what's the word, progressed, then other Americans would be interested, and other Americans would disagree with Carol, about her ideas, and I'm just saying I'm just going to let the Americans fight it out amongst themselves. I mean, I can make recommendations, but since I'm not American, I can never, I can only advise and warn. But the whole idea of secular Quranism with American characteristics is that Americans themselves would decide what it's going to be and what their interpretation is going to be. So that's really what it is. And I kind of got into trouble with Alex Woodrow, who said he supported secular Quranism, and he was giving me trouble, saying, well, if you're going to let anybody interpret it in any way they want, what is the point? And my answer was, well, I can't stop them. I don't have an army to forbid them and censor them from, saying that that's how they interpret the Quran, which is different to me, and so I would have to let them do it, and I can only, make my own recommendations and say why I don't agree with their interpretation. For the Israelis, to get back to your question, I mean, it could work. I mean, the Israelis can say, well, we're not going to let any Arabs interpret secular Quranism with Israeli characteristics. I mean, they could say that, and I would be able to, stop them. So it would be up to them. And we know there are very different kinds of Israelis, because about half of them are religious and about half of them are secular. So we don't quite know. And also, with regard to the Israeli Supreme Court, um, a lot of these rabbi channels are talking about it and saying it's ridiculous that in Israel, um, the Supreme Court has um, the Supreme Court has a right to veto who gets appointed to the Supreme Court, which is ridiculous, isn't it? I don't know if you agree, Vincent. I can't hear. I can't hear Vincent. Um,
What? Who? Say that again. Who has the power to veto what?
the Israeli Supreme Court has the power to veto who is appointed to the Supreme Court. And it's very proactive and it's very liberal. And that's why the religious Jews are complaining. And Rabbi Mizrahi was saying, in America, these Supreme Court appointments are, obviously fought over, and depending on who is president, they'll kind of put their own people in the Supreme Court, but at least you would know that if it's a Republican, you know, president, he would try and put Republican, justices in the Supreme Court with Republican sympathies, and ditto for Democrat presidents. But he says that in Israel, the Israeli Supreme Court has a power to veto the appointments of those who join it. So it's doubly restrictive, is what I'm trying to say, and they say they're not going to put up with it anymore. Because I know they were mumbling about it, and I didn't really get what they were complaining about. I mean, apart from too many liberal judges and whatever.
Something. Claire, we've been going for about an hour and 46 minutes. I usually like to stay longer, but I need to rest a little bit because I'm gonna go out in a little bit. And
Okay,
I don't know if you're gonna keep going, but I just need to rest.
all right then. Well, thank you for coming, and
Yes.
I'll go too. Um,
Okay.
okay, well, I think we
All
managed
right.
to have a reasonably good conversation.
Yes.
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you, everyone who tuned in.